My name is Sofia, and until this evening, I believed I understood exactly where my life was meant to take me. I am 37 years old, a devoted wife and mother, and I have spent the better part of my life wrapped in the rhythms of prayer, family duties, and the comforting predictability of routine. On paper and in the eyes of our community, I have everything a woman could ask for: a loving husband, 2 beautiful children, and a faith that guides every step. Yet late at night, when the world falls silent and the shadows lengthen across my ceiling, a quiet unease stirs within me, questions I have learned to push aside but never quite silence. I was raised in a household where the Quran was more than a book. It was the very heartbeat of our existence. My parents taught me to recite its verses almost before I could walk, and from a young age I learned the discipline of fasting through Ramadan, the devotion of 5 daily prayers, and the comfort of rituals that marked every stage of life. To me, faith was synonymous with certainty, a solid foundation beneath my feet. But as I grew older, I felt faint tremors of doubt that I dared not speak aloud. I wondered if submission to rules alone could ever satisfy the deepest longings of my heart, and whether the afterlife I had been promised would truly unfold as I had been taught. These thoughts arrived unbidden, whispers in the dark that I silenced with the conviction that faith was, by definition, unquestioning. Today began like any other Thursday. Omar, my husband, returned from work a little earlier than usual, his broad smile betraying an excitement I couldn't quite place. I spent the afternoon in our cozy kitchen, guided by habit and love, preparing a special dinner: spiced rice pilaf with tender chicken, a fragrant shepherd's salad, and sweet baklava for dessert. The rich aroma of cumin and cinnamon filled the air, and the laughter of our 10-year-old son and 7-year-old daughter echoed through the halls as they chased one another around the living room. I paused at the kitchen counter to watch them, my heart swelling with gratitude for these everyday joys. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of coral and lavender, I called the children to wash their hands. Omar set the table with care, arranging plates and glasses while humming a tune I recognized only as home. We gathered around the low wooden table just moments after the Adhan called us to evening prayer. The softly glowing lantern overhead cast a warm, golden light on our faces. My son chattered excitedly about a math quiz he had aced. My daughter, cheeks still rosy from play, described the new story she was writing for school. Omar shared an anecdote from his day, a small victory at work that had him beaming with pride. And I, for a fleeting moment, felt the perfect ease of being exactly where I was meant to be. For a while I managed to forget the doubts that sometimes stirred within me. I sipped sweet mint tea as we ate, watching Omar's strong hands gesture animatedly, watching the children's eyes light up at his jokes. The flicker of contentment was rare and precious. I clung to it, reminding myself of how blessed I was. Yet even in that glow, a part of me remained alert, as though waiting for something to upset the delicate balance of peace. I reached for another bite of rice and chicken, and that is when it happened. At first I thought a stray bone had lodged in my throat, an annoyance that would surely pass with a swallow. But the discomfort only grew sharper. My hands flew to my neck before I even realized what was happening. I opened my mouth, trying to cough, trying to speak, but no sound came. A cold panic spread through me as my chest tightened, and I realized with crushing clarity that I could not breathe. Omar's eyes went wide. "Sofia?" he called, his voice thick with alarm. Relief cracked his smile just enough to turn it into something else: fear. My vision blurred around the edges as I coughed, the air still refusing to come. The children froze, their laughter evaporated, and in that terrible silence I knew I was no longer merely tired or anxious. I was in danger, more danger than I had ever imagined, and in that instant, everything I had taken for granted teetered on the edge of oblivion. I didn't immediately recognize what was happening. One second, I was sitting at the low wooden table, lifting a forkful of rice and chicken toward my mouth. The next, a sharp pain shot through my throat, as though something had lodged deep inside. I froze, fork halfway to my lips, and instinctively pressed my fingers against my neck. My mind raced. Was it a bone? A piece of cartilage? At first I tried to swallow, certain I could dislodge it with a firm swallow or a cough, but the cough never came. Panic unfurled inside me like a dark banner. My chest tightened as I realized I could not draw a breath. My vision began to blur at the edges. I opened my mouth to call out, but only a strangled gasp emerged. I shook my head, hoping movement would jar the obstruction loose. Instead, my heart started pounding in my ears. Every fiber of my being screamed that something was very, very wrong. Omar was the first to see the change. His hand stilled on the table, mid-gesture, and his smile vanished. "Sofia?" he said, voice low and urgent. I tried to nod, but my head felt too heavy. Tears sprang to my eyes as the reality crystallized. I was suffocating, and I couldn't stop it. "Call an ambulance!" Omar shouted to the children as he pushed back from the table, chair scraping against the tile floor. My son, trembling, reached for the landline, hands shaking so badly the handset rattled. My daughter ran to Omar, clinging to his leg, her face ashen. I felt their fear before I saw it. Omar dropped to his knees behind me and wrapped his arms around my torso. I barely registered what he was doing until he positioned his fist above my navel and pressed inward, a Heimlich maneuver. The movement crushed the last breath from my lungs. I gasped for air, chest ulcerating with pain, but still nothing came. Omar repeated the thrusts, each one more desperate than the last. I heard my son's panicked voice at the phone. "Yes, yes. My mother is choking. Please hurry, thank you." My vision swam. I didn't understand how the wall suddenly seemed 10 feet farther away. I felt my legs begin to buckle. Omar's arms held me upright, but only barely. My hands slipped from my throat to his forearms, as if seeking an anchor against the void that threatened to swallow me. Time slowed. I became aware of the pounding in my ears, the frantic beating of my heart, and the distant wail of the siren that drew closer. Sounds became muffled, as though I were underwater. A thin ribbon of panic and terror ran through me, but beneath it I felt something else. A cold stillness, like the moment before an avalanche crashes down. I tried to focus on Omar's face, to see the concern in his eyes, to draw strength from him, but everything was fading. My vision flickered in and out, the tiled floor, the smooth curve of the table edge, the lantern's glow, all dissolving into darkness. My thoughts fractured. I thought of my children's laughter, my husband's warm embrace, the countless nights I'd spent praying for a life of purpose and peace. And then I thought, this can't be how it ends. My last conscious thought was of regret. Regret for the doubts I had never voiced, for the questions I had buried, for the weight I had borne alone. Not here. Not like this. And then, mercifully, everything went black, and I don't know how long I was unconscious. Minutes felt like hours, hours like seconds. In that void, there was neither fear nor pain, only the absence of everything I had known. I was no longer myself, yet a fragment of awareness lingered, adrift in that infinite space. My body did not exist there, and I was free from the constraint of time and breath. I felt, rather than thought, a tremendous stillness. It was as if I were floating in a silent sea, unmoored and weightless. The panic that had seized me at the table was gone, replaced by a curious calm. A part of me, my soul perhaps, acknowledged that I had died, and yet there was no sense of finality or despair. And then, just as suddenly, I sensed light. Soft, warm, enveloping light that permeated every part of me. It did not sting my eyes, nor did it blind me. It simply was. The darkness receded, and in its place I found myself suspended in an expanse of gentle radiance. But this was not yet clarity. It was simply another layer of the unknown. I did not know where I was or how I had arrived there. All I felt was a profound release from fear. My memories of the kitchen, of Omar's hands on my ribs, of my own frantic struggle for air, faded to the background as the light beckoned. And yet, even in that softened glow, a spark of awareness remained. I am not done. A whisper rose within me, neither a sound nor a voice, but a knowing that I could not yet understand. It told me that this was merely the threshold, the hinge upon which everything would turn. For a moment, I hovered there, between the life I had known and whatever waited beyond. Then the sense of being pulled upward overwhelmed me, and the darkness, fear, and pain of the world below dissolved entirely. I felt myself drawn toward the light, as if guided by an unseen hand. It wasn't frightening. It felt like returning home. And in that instant of transition, before I crossed fully into whatever lay ahead, the color drained from my awareness, and my consciousness slipped beneath the surface of the world once more. I came back gasping. Cool air flooded my lungs. I coughed, and the strangled sounds returned. Omar's arms steadied me as I sat up, slick with sweat, hands trembling. The phone lay on the floor. My son's frantic eyes met mine. Paramedics filled the doorway, voices calm but urgent. Hands, warm and confident, took over. Oxygen mask, stethoscope, gentle but firm manipulation of my chest. The antiseptic scent of the ambulance washed over me in waves. As they lifted me onto a stretcher, I caught Omar's hand, and his eyes, filled with tears and relief, locked onto mine. I wanted to tell him what I had seen, what I had felt, about the light, the stillness, the sense that this was only the beginning. But my throat was too raw, my mind too dazed. Instead, I squeezed his hand and managed a whispered, "I'm here," he nodded, voice thick. Thank God. And though the world around me was a blur of sirens and flashing lights, deep inside I carried a certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. When I slipped beyond the edge of darkness, I felt nothing. No weight, no fear, no sense of my body at all. It was as though I had been unthreaded from the fabric of the world, left to drift in a void where time had no meaning. My last memory of the kitchen, the scrape of Omar's chair, my son's frantic voice, the sting of oxygen returning to my lungs, receded like a dream I could no longer grasp. In its place was an expanse of pure absence, a silence so complete that it shimmered around me. I can't say how long I hovered there, suspended in that formless nothingness. It might have been a heartbeat or an eternity. Gradually, a subtle vibration stirred in the emptiness, like the first tremor before an earthquake. It pulsed through me, though I had no body to feel it, and carried with it the faintest glow. The darkness retreated, not as if yanked away, but as though it simply evaporated in the presence of something inherently incompatible with it. The glow grew, blossoming around me in gentle waves. At first, it was no more than the color of moonlight on water, soft, diffuse, and utterly inviting. I felt drawn toward it, though again, there was no sensation of movement. It was as if the light was moving toward me, wrapping me in its warmth. The simplest word that rose in my mind was come. There was no coercion in it, only invitation. With the light came a sense of release, years of unseen burdens, the weight of expectations, the secret tremor of doubt, the relentless striving to earn acceptance, melted away. I felt each invisible chain snapping, one by one. My chest, which back in the hospital had convulsed with pain and fear, expanded to the infinite. Here, there was no need for breath. Every part of me was already suffused with gentle life. As the radiance deepened, I became aware of a space around me. It wasn't a room or a landscape, but a boundless horizon of soft, glowing light. There were no shadows, no colors beyond the pale gold and warm white that seemed to pulse in time with the beat of a heart I no longer possessed. I sensed that this space answered to no laws of physics or time. Past and future were woven together, and yet neither demanded my attention. In that realm, my thoughts surfaced as clear, unhurried currents. I remembered my childhood, sitting cross-legged on the prayer rug in our family home, the sun filtering through stained glass windows. my mother's soft voice guiding me through the Quran's verses. I recalled my wedding day, the swirl of silk and jasmine, the promises whispered under a canopy of rose petals. I saw the births of my children, the rush of love and awe when I first held them. Each memory glowed briefly in the light around me, like a star appearing and then dissolving into the vastness. None of these recollections brought judgment or shame. Instead, they were presented with a tender clarity, moments of joy and sorrow, faith and fear, love given and love withheld. In the world I had just left, I had believed that every question I harbored carried the risk of condemnation. Here I understood that truth need not terrify, it could free. A gentle knowing settled over me. I had crossed a threshold. What lay beyond was neither death nor life as I had known it, but something that encompassed both and transcended them. There was no sense of pressing onward or being turned back. I simply existed at the hinge between realms, poised to take the next step. And then I felt it, a presence. It began as the softest tremor at the edge of awareness, but it carried an unmistakable warmth, an intelligence that was neither cold nor distant. It touched the core of me, as though probing to discover who I was, what I carried in the secret chambers of my heart. There was no voice, not yet, but I was certain I was not alone. The light responded, shifting in intensity around me. It pulsed in gentle waves, like the breath of the universe itself. With each pulse, the presence drew nearer, and I felt a sense of recognition stirring within me, a spark of familiarity I could not place. My own doubts and fears, the countless prayers I had repeated by rote, the rules I had followed so meticulously, all of it paled beside the simple awareness that I was deeply known. Fear, which had haunted me in the moments before I died, had no purchase here. Instead, a serene clarity settled in its place. I understood that every question I had ever asked, every longing I had ever felt, was acknowledged in this stillness. There was an implicit promise that I would find the answers I sought, not through striving or merit, but through the embrace of this light and the presence it carried. As the presence drew closer, the warmth coalesced into a subtle melody that resonated within my being. It was neither sound nor silence. It was simply the fundamental harmony of existence. In that melody, I felt the power that had shaped the stars and set the oceans in motion. I felt a love that was neither sentimental nor fickle, but steadfast and infinite. I tried to reach toward it, though I had no hands to move. The effort was unnecessary. The presence enfolded me like the embrace of a dearest friend. In that embrace, a soft whisper echoed not in my ears, but in the quiet expanse of my soul. "You have come home." Those words, simple, tender, irrevocable, shifted everything. In a single moment, I realized that this realm, this light, and this presence had existed around me all along, waiting patiently for me to awaken. All the rituals, the prayers, the striving, they had pointed me here, even if I did not know how. And as I hovered in that sacred threshold, I felt the next movement of the light, an opening, an invitation to proceed. I sensed that beyond this point lay a revelation more profound than any I had yet received, an encounter that would transform the very fabric of my being. I paused, though the concept of pausing was tenuous in a place beyond time. I gathered the fragile threads of my remaining self-awareness and offered myself to the light and the presence that beckoned. "I am here," I thought, and the light answered with radiant affirmation, guiding me into the next unfolding of truth. When the light fully enveloped me, it was as if I'd crossed an invisible boundary into a reality both stranger and more intimate than anything I had known. The brilliance was soft, no glare, no sharp edges, just a living radiance that pulsated gently around me. My shape, such as it was, seemed to dissolve into the glow, leaving only the essence of my awareness, transparent and weightless. In that place, language failed me. The word light felt too limited, love sounded too small. I sensed that every atom of this realm was alive with purpose, every ray of illumination an expression of a presence I could not yet name. It was not the sun's light, nor the flicker of a candle. It was the pure self-revelation of something infinite, vibrant, and deeply personal. I floated, or perhaps stood, surrounded by this glow, my mind still tethered to the memories of my life, the contours of my children's faces, the cadence of Omar's prayers, the smell of cardamom in our kitchen. Now those recollections surfaced not as regrets or doubts, but as tender echoes, each one beckoning me deeper into this new expanse. A warmth spread from the center of my being outward, filling every corner of my awareness. It felt as though the light was nourishing me from within, dissolving every fear and worry I had carried. I realized in that moment that the burdens I thought were mine by birthright, the need to earn love, the fear of not being enough, the silent tension between duty and desire, were melting away like frost under a spring sun. With clarity I had never known, I saw that the realm itself had no boundaries. There was no up or down, no near or far, just an endless ocean of radiance. Yet within that infinity, I perceived hints of motions and contours, ripples of brightness that flowed around me, arching like waves and returning like gentle tides. I sensed that this light was not static. It breathed, it sang, it pulsed with the heartbeat of the cosmos. As I tuned into those rhythms, a chorus of knowing stirred within me. It was not words, but a series of revelations unfolding like petals. Every soul is born of this light. Every question we ask is an echo of its call. Every longing we feel points us back to its source. These truths didn't land as abstract concepts. They resonated deep in the core of me, aligning with the hidden chords of my spirit. I felt an overwhelming gratitude for the life I had lived, for the family I would return to, for the limitless welcome of this place. And yet, even as I bathed in the glow, a tender curiosity arose. What was the nature of this light? What was the presence behind it? I turned, or thought I turned, and there, subtler than the surrounding brilliance but unmistakably distinct, was a shape, a radiance denser, more focused, that beckoned. It hovered at a distance that was simultaneously close and far, if such words could ever apply here. As I approached, though no movement was required, my sense of self grew sharp. I felt for the first time since arriving that I had a name, a history, a unique spark of identity, rather than the diffuse awareness of floating in a sea. I was Sofia, daughter, wife, mother, believer, doubter, seeker. All of that was still me, yet now I understood that it existed within this greater glow, not apart from it. Memories surfaced again, but this time they were illuminated from behind. Moments from my life played out like scenes in a theater bathed in warm light, and my wedding, where I'd whispered vows I half understood but fully meant. The birth of my children, when every breath was wonder and every cry a song. The nights of prayer, when I recited the same verses yet felt something missing in my heart. Each memory was offered without judgment or shame. I recognized my imperfections, my pride, my secret fears. But in this space, they were not obstacles. They were threads woven into a larger tapestry, each one integral to the whole. As the memories settled, the denser radiance ahead shifted. I sensed an invitation. No words came, but my entire being felt drawn forward. My heart, wherever it resided, thrummed with equal parts anticipation and quiet trust. When the figure emerged from the light, I knew immediately that this was the source of everything I had glimpsed. He was neither silhouette nor shadow, but presence incarnate, radiant beyond description. I perceived the outline of a form, yet that form seemed woven from the same luminance that surrounded me. His eyes, if I could call them eyes, were the purest expression of welcome I had ever encountered. I felt my own center quake with reverence. Fear had no foothold here, only awe. I wanted to fall to my knees, to dissolve entirely in worship. But there was no gravity in this place. Instead, I bowed my soul, and then I heard a voice, neither loud nor soft, but profoundly insistent. It spoke directly into the core of me, resonating in every chamber of my being. Sophia, my beloved. The sound of my name, spoken from the light, unlocked something ancient within me. I felt tears well behind unseen eyes, not from sorrow, but from a joy so deep it threatened to shatter me. The voice carried no admonition, no demand. It carried recognition and affirmation. As I listened, the presence drew closer, though it did not move in any conventional sense. It was as if proximity itself was redefined here. I felt enveloped in love so vast it defied the limits of language. Thoughts rose unbidden. I have been waiting for you. I have always been here. Questions tumbled through my mind, but fearlessly. How long had I been here? Who was this presence? Why me? But before I could form the words, the voice continued, not answering directly, but filling the space with a sound like music. You have known me all your life, though you did not recognize me. I have been the whisper in your heart, the hope you dared not claim, the peace for which you longed. I felt every fiber of my being respond. I understood that this place was not a reward or a punishment, but the pure revelation of reality, the truth behind the veil of ordinary life. Everything I had believed about faith and ritual and striving had pointed toward this encounter, even if I had not realized it. The figure raised what I understood to be a hand, and the light around us shifted again. It flowed outward, revealing patterns, currents of brightness that traced arcs and spirals, as though illustrating a living map of creation. I sensed that each arc represented a soul, each spiral a journey, each convergence a moment of grace. In that moment, I comprehended the interwoven nature of existence, that my small life was part of an infinite web, and yet infinitely precious. The doubts I had carried, the fear that my prayers were empty, my devotion insufficient, were rectified in this light. I sensed that every act of kindness I had ever offered, every prayer I had ever whispered, had been noticed and woven into this radiant tapestry. Then the presence spoke again. Here you see truth. Here you are known. Here you are home. The words were simple, but each one landed like a seed in the fertile ground of my spirit. In the pulse of the light that followed, I felt a stirring of purpose. I was not meant to linger eternally in this realm, no matter how perfect it felt. I was loved deeply, yes, but love calls one to share, to become channel rather than reservoir. Yet another wave of serenity washed over me, softening the pang of knowing I would have to leave this place. It did not feel like loss. It felt like the final rightness of beginning. I realized that the true adventure awaited on the other side of that threshold. As the figure stepped, or perhaps merely extended his presence toward me, I sensed an intimacy that transcended all previous human experience. I felt seen, known, cherished in the most authentic sense. All the questions I had ever held, about purpose, about afterlife, about the nature of God, seemed to be answered in that one embrace of awareness. And still, I remained aware of my own agency, my own voice. This was not a dream to be ingested whole, but a revelation to be integrated. I sensed that I must remember every nuance, every taste of light, every echo of that voice, and carry it back into my living world. A final wave of brilliance pulsed through me as the presence softened its hold, giving way to the path home. I felt gently, so gently, drawn backward through the light, the glow fading into pale luminescence, then into a gentle haze, then into the familiar contours of my own body. I gasped for air, my lungs, starved and aching, filled with cool hospital room oxygen. My eyes snapped open, and at first the stark white ceiling was a jarring contrast to the boundless radiance I had just left. My heart thundered, and tears streamed down my cheeks. Omar's face hovered over me, relief etched in every line. "You're awake," he whispered, voice trembling. "You're back." I did not yet know how to speak of what I had experienced. Words felt like flimsy vessels for truth that had reshaped the universe within me. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I could never be the same again. As life rushed back, the beeping of monitors, the hushed voices of nurses, the steady presence of my family, I held close the echo of that light and that love. I clung to the knowledge that I had glimpsed eternity, and that eternity was now woven into the fabric of my every breath. I hovered in the radiance, suspended between two worlds, my heart still echoing with the melody of that boundless light. For an age, though time had no currency here, I simply existed, absorbing the peace that permeated every corner of this realm. Then, as though cleaving through the glow itself, I became aware of a presence more focused, more intense than the surrounding brilliance. It did not arrive with fanfare or thunder, it simply was. An undeniable weightlessness, a gentle authority woven of light and soundless love. I felt my essence respond. No terror, only a deep reverence. I sensed that this presence was the source of everything that had led me here. The whisper of my first prayer, the stir of doubts I never voiced, the burdens I carried as a devout wife and mother. All of it converged in this moment of encounter, and I knew I was standing before something or someone far greater than any earthly measure. As the presence drew nearer, the glow shifted, parting like a curtain in a grand theater. In that opening stood a figure whose form seemed crafted from the very light that surrounded us. I saw the outline of a face, features too radiant and fluid for human memory, yet unmistakably kind. I perceived gentle eyes, deep and fathomless, that held both the wisdom of ages and the tenderness of a friend. Around the figure, the light shimmered and danced, flowing as though the air itself rejoiced in his nearness. I trembled, though trembling felt strange in a place without gravity, yet I felt no fear. Instead, an exquisite yearning welled within me, to be fully known, fully seen. I realized that this encounter was more intimate than any interaction I had ever known. The barriers I had erected around my heart, the pride, the secret doubts, the silent striving for worthiness, melted in the presence of this one who stood before me. Then I heard the voice, not spoken aloud, but resonating in every fiber of my being. It was rich and warm, with a timbre that seemed to carry the very pulse of creation. "Sofia," the voice said, soft and unhurried. Hearing my name spoken from the light broke something open within me. Tears, though I had no eyes to shed them through, coursed down unseen cheeks. My entire being quaked with awe and wonder. I struggled to find words, but none seemed adequate for this encounter. Instead, I opened myself to the presence, bearing my soul in silent surrender. The figure stepped, or seemed to step, closer, though space here was not measured in feet or inches. The light around him deepened, and I felt as if every unspoken question I had ever held pulsed to the surface, waiting for an answer. At last the voice spoke again. "You are deeply loved." Those 3 words, simple, direct, landed in the core of me like a balm. I realized I had spent my life believing I had to earn love through obedience, through ritual, through endless striving. Yet here was love proclaimed as a baseline, a first truth, unconditional and unmerited. I felt relief so immense it nearly unhinged my mind. I found my voice at last, trembling with emotion. "Who are you?" I whispered, not out loud, but in the deepest chamber of my heart. There was no hesitation, no mystery in the reply. "I am Jesus." The name erupted in me like thunder in a silent sky. Jesus, prophet, teacher, Son of God. So many doctrines, so many arguments, so many uncertainties I had never dared to explore. Growing up, I had known him only as a figure in distant parables, a righteous man among others, a name spoken by Christians but foreign in my mosque-circled world. And yet here he stood, not as idea or symbol, but as presence itself, radiant and alive. I don't understand," I confessed. "I was trained to believe you were a prophet, a good man, but not the Son of God. Not the way." My soul quaked as I spoke, for I sensed the enormity of what I was about to acknowledge. Jesus' gaze did not waver. The light around him softened, as though in a gesture of compassion. "I know the questions you carry," he said. "I know the doubts you have buried deep. It is not my purpose to condemn you, but to reveal the fullness of truth and love. This light is the source from which all life springs, and through me you see it most clearly." He raised a hand, delicate, luminous, impossibly real, and the radiance around us shifted again. I felt 1,000 threads of light weaving through me, illuminating my hidden fears, my regrets, my unspoken prayers. Each thread glowed with understanding, as if every secret hope I had ever dared to voice was met with grace. My voice choked with tears. "Why me? Why now?" I asked, my thoughts tumbling over each other. "What about my faith? My prayers? The rituals I have honored all my life?" He inclined his head gently. "Your devotion has never been in vain. Every prayer you uttered, every fast you kept, carried you closer to this moment. But never forget, the light I reveal is not earned, it is given. You do not approach me by your works alone, but by the invitation of my love." I remembered the heavy weight of obligation I had felt each dawn as I rose for prayer, the weary compliance as I recited verses I could no longer taste, the glimmer of hope I buried each night when I whispered, "Lord, is this enough?" All of it had been a path that led me here, yet none of it could contain the breadth of what I now beheld. He spoke again, voice both tender and resonant. "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Yet do not mistake this as a barrier. It is an open gate, wide as the heavens, through which all who seek with a humble heart may pass." When he said Father, a new understanding bloomed within me. All my life I had known God as the Almighty, the Judge, the one whose favor must be earned. Yet here Jesus spoke of relationship, of intimacy, of a love that yearns rather than demands. My heart swelled with both awe and relief. Trembling, I asked the question I had been too afraid to speak. "What about Allah? What about everything I have been taught since childhood?" He smiled, if a smile could be woven of pure radiance, and the light pulsed in gentle waves. "My love does not compete with what you have known. It fulfills it. The one I call Father is the same divine mercy you have worshipped. I am the bridge between your seeking heart and the fullness of relationship you crave. All that you have known prepares you to receive what I bring." I felt a crack in the walls around my heart, built over decades of certainty and fear. For the first time, I sensed that faith was not about the absence of questions, but about the courage to follow the answers. Tears welled again as I tried to form another question, but the presence pressed no urgency. In that moment of grace, I felt anchored by the promise of companionship. He reached out, not with flesh and bone, but with the unmistakable reality of compassion incarnate, and in that gesture lay an unspoken promise: "I will not leave you alone." I closed my mind and let the truth settle in my soul. For so long I had pursued knowledge of the divine as if from a distance, as though God were beyond reach. Now I understood that love was not distant, it was immediate and personal. He did not speak to me with thunderbolts of judgment, but with the quiet authority of unwavering care. "I want to trust you," I whispered, uncertain but earnest. "I want to believe that your love can truly transform my life." Light shimmered in response, enveloping me with warmth. "Your trust will be enough," came the reply. "You do not walk this path by your own strength. I will guide you, and my spirit will dwell within you, illuminating every step." I felt my entire being exhale, a release of all the breath I had never known I was holding. The yearning that had lingered at the edges of my prayers, the longing for peace I could name only in my dreams, the ache of questions I feared to voice, all of it dissolved in the clarity of this revelation. As the presence of Jesus stayed before me, I sensed that this encounter was only the beginning. Beyond the radiance stood horizons of truth yet to be unveiled, questions yet to be answered, a commission yet to be embraced. I did not understand all that lay ahead, but I knew this: I would never return to the same life I had known. He reached out again, and the light around us shifted, revealing a path of swirling brilliance that beckoned me onward. Come, his voice invited. There is more to see, more to know, more to become. I gave myself wholeheartedly to that invitation, stepping, or letting myself be carried, into the deeper light. As I moved, the love I had always sought became not an aspiration, but a living reality. And in that moment, in the presence of the living light, I understood that everything I had believed, everything I had done, every secret doubt, and every whispered prayer had prepared me for this divine encounter, and for the journey that awaited when I returned to the world of flesh and breath. I floated in the radiance at Jesus' side as the light around us shifted, revealing the world below in startling clarity. It was as if I peered through a translucent veil, watching scenes unfold with unflinching honesty. At first glance, the city streets looked normal, bustling crowds, cars weaving through traffic, neon signs flickering in the twilight. But something beneath the surface thrummed with tension. I saw commuters hunched over their phones, faces lit by screens rather than human warmth. Mothers pushed strollers through plazas while heads remained bowed in scrolling trance. Friends sat shoulder to shoulder in cafes, yet each was lost in a private scroll of news feeds and updates. Noise filled the air, car horns, snippets of conversation, the hum of air conditioners. But despite the lively soundtrack, I sensed an undercurrent of isolation. In that moment, Jesus placed a hand on my shoulder, though I had no body to feel it, and I felt a quiet invitation to look deeper. The crowd's cheerful veneer fractured, revealing the hidden weights each person carried. A young man's smile dissolved into a flicker of anxiety as he read a headline about economic collapse. A teenager's laugh evaporated into shame when an online comment cut too close to home. An elderly woman stooped back, straightened only briefly when she caught sight of her reflection in a storefront window, then bowed again under the burden of loneliness. "See how they move," Jesus' voice echoed in my heart. "They chase comfort in fleeting pleasures and superficial connections, yet the deepest needs remain unmet." My vision shifted again, this time widening to encompass entire neighborhoods. I saw glass towers dyeing the skyline with steel and ambition. Within those towers, boardrooms flickered with the glow of financial charts and quarterly projections. Suits and ties conferred power, but behind closed doors I sensed a hunger that spreadsheets could never sate. Executives smiled for cameras, yet behind the walls of luxury their faces betrayed exhaustion and worry. Below the towers, I watched factories churn out endless consumer goods, widgets, gadgets, baubles, each promising status or convenience. Delivery trucks whizzed down highways in a ceaseless parade. Yet as mountains of packaging piled up in landfills and rivers bore the sheen of toxins, I felt a mournful pulse. This world was drowning in its own excess. Then the light shifted again, focusing on gatherings that divided rather than united. I saw neighbors shouting from porches, their voices laced with suspicion. I saw protesters clashing with police lines, each side certain of its own righteousness. I saw families torn apart by politics, rituals of condemnation louder than prayers of compassion. Lines of race, ideology, religion, and nationality carved deep trenches in the human heart, and the chasm between us and them widened every day. Tears welled in my unseen eyes. I thought of the warmth and connection I had felt only moments before in the realm of light, and contrasted it with the cold suspicion I now witnessed on earth. "Why is it like this?" I whispered, my voice trembling within my soul. Jesus' presence grew gentle yet urgent. "They have forgotten love," he said. "They have replaced it with fear. They erect walls to protect themselves, yet those walls imprison them." The vision shifted once more, this time revealing small pockets of light amid the darkness. I saw people kneeling in prayer in humble homes, their faces illuminated with hope rather than screens. I saw communities gathering around shared meals. No technology, just conversation, laughter, and a genuine desire to know one another. I saw volunteers distributing food to the hungry, listening to their stories without judgment, and offering both sustenance and a compassionate ear. In a rundown neighborhood, I watched a small group of believers pray for reconciliation between feuding families. Their voices rose in songs of forgiveness, and I saw grudges dissolve like mist. In a remote village, I saw a mother teaching her children kindness by caring for an injured stray dog, modeling compassion in the simple acts of feeding and tending. "These," Jesus whispered, "are my children, those who choose to live in the light of love. They are not perfect, but they embody the kingdom that transcends division." I felt my heart swell. Each humble act of kindness, each moment of genuine presence, glowed in the vision like a beacon. Even a single smile shared across a crowded street shone with significance. I realized that transformation was not found in grand gestures alone, but in the daily choices to extend grace. The cityscape shifted into a kaleidoscope of villages, towns, and great cities across the globe. I saw the same patterns repeated: the endless chase for power, the isolating clutch of fear, and the spark of hope ignited by love. I understood that the human story was a tapestry woven of both shadow and light. Before I could dwell on these revelations, the light condensed again, drawing my attention back to a single figure, a weary man sitting alone in a dark apartment. He stared at the empty half of a dinner table where his family once gathered before they drifted apart in silent resentment. Grief weighed him down, and I felt the ache in his chest as though it were my own. A soft glow appeared above him, almost too faint to notice. It pulsed gently, and he looked up, startled. The glow took shape in his mind's eye, faces of loved ones, moments of joy, the promise of reconciliation. He closed his eyes and sighed, the tension in his shoulders loosening. "This," Jesus' voice said, "is the seed of hope. Even the smallest light can scatter the darkness." I watched as the man rose from his chair and picked up his phone. His trembling thumb hovered over call. I felt the power of that single moment, the choice to reach out, to risk vulnerability, to invite love back in. Tears fell unbidden as I realized the world's fractures could only be healed one heartbeat at a time, one act of faith at a time. The vision collapsed into a swirling point of light that carried within it infinite possibilities, every person, every moment, every choice. Jesus guided me back to our vantage point in the radiance. "You have seen what is," he said gently, "and what could be. You have seen both the brokenness and the hope. This world longs for healing, and the medicine is love made visible through your hands, your words, your life." In that suspended moment, I understood my commission anew. The light and the darkness coexisted, but I no longer despaired. I carried within me the spark of transformation, the knowledge that love, when lived authentically, could ripple outward and mend the deepest wounds. And as the vision faded, I clung to the echo of that truth. Faith is not passive. It is a call to embody the light we have received, to shine in the places most shadowed, and to believe that even the smallest flicker can ignite a beacon of hope. When the tapestry of light and shadow in the vision began to dissolve, I felt the presence beside me grow even more focused, an intensity that drew me near with both gentleness and unspoken urgency. The world I had just witnessed, in all its brokenness and flickers of hope, hovered in my mind like a living map of need. Then, in a voice that resonated through every fiber of my being, I heard the words that would forever redefine my purpose: "Sofia, go and share my love with the world." Those 5 simple words landed like a drumbeat in my heart. Go, share my love with the world. The scope of that command swept over me like a storm surge. Part of me trembled at the enormity of it. Me, just me, a wife, a mother, a woman who had once believed faith was contained in rituals and prayers, now summoned to bear a message meant for every broken soul on earth. I opened my mouth to protest. My mind raced. How? Why me? but no words came. Instead, I felt the full weight of the world's longing press in around me. The mother who grieves alone, the child whose laughter has been stolen, the refugee camp echoing with unanswered prayers. I felt their hearts in that moment as if they were mine. Fear prickled my skin. If I accepted this commission, I would leave behind the comfort of routine, the safety of unspoken faith. I imagined Omar's face when I told him I was to speak of what I had seen. I saw the curious, half-hopeful expression on my children's faces as they struggled to understand why their mother would risk disbelief and scorn. I pictured our community, friends, neighbors, elders, tilting their heads in polite confusion or turning away in offended horror. Yet beneath the fear, another current stirred, a fierce, trembling hope, the same hope I had tasted in the realm of light, when every doubt melted away in the knowledge that I was deeply and unconditionally loved. If that love could heal me, could set me free from the prison of my own fears, perhaps it could way into the darkest corners of other lives as well. I pressed my hand to the glow at my chest, a gesture of both surrender and resolve. Yes, I thought. Yes, I will go. But even as I made that vow, a dozen questions swirled. What will I say? How will I find the words for an experience that transcends language? Who will believe me? The presence beside me seemed to answer. A warmth flowed from it, an assurance that I would not walk this path alone. Though no physical form moved, I felt hands settle gently on my shoulders. In that contact, I understood a promise that transcended any earthly guarantee. I will be with you always. The words echoed in my soul, I will never leave you nor forsake you. I remembered them from a scripture I had only just begun to study, but here they were made living reality in the light. The promise was not an abstract doctrine, but the pulse of existence itself, a current I could step into and draw strength from at every turn. A vision unfolded before me, not of nations or cultures, but of single, unremarkable lives, a crumpled photograph in a drawer, alone under a street lamp, a nameless face etched with longing. Each scene carried the same question, who will reach me? And each answered in turn, you will. Tears streamed, though I could not see them, tears of awe and humility. I thought of the many times I had believed I was unworthy of love, trapped beneath mountains of self-judgment. Now I realized that worthiness was not mine to earn. It was granted by the one who stands beside us in our darkest moments. The same love that had welcomed me into the realm of light would flow through me, uniting my heartbeat to the heartbeat of every soul in need. My breath, never more precious than now, rippled through me. I felt my lungs expand with purpose, as though the very act of breathing had become sacred. I remembered Omar's steady prayers at dawn, my children's innocent laughter, the softness of home. All of it led me here, to this commission that transcended every boundary I had ever known. I could almost hear the echo of the world's heartbeat in that silent expanse, the slow, persistent drum of hope that beats in every human chest, no matter how battered. And in that echo I heard again the call, go and share my love with the world. The presence behind me pulsed in encouragement. I felt the promise of guidance in every nuance of the light, not just an awareness that I would stumble, but an assurance that every step, every falter, would be met with grace. I would have questions, I would face rejection, I would wrestle with doubt. Yet never once would I be abandoned. I opened my mind to the scope of the mission unfolding, to speak a word of peace in a nation at war, to lean across the table to someone who had never known kindness, to share bread with the hungry and comfort with the greedy. The possibilities stretched beyond any earthly map, but the essence remained unchanged, love made visible through simple acts of presence and compassion. As the final threads of the vision wove back into the infinite glow, I felt myself being carried, or perhaps choosing, to return. The light receded gently, giving way to the familiar haze of consciousness. I felt the cool sting of oxygen in my lungs once more, the gentle pressure of a nurse's hand on my wrist, the soft murmur of medical equipment. I opened my eyes and saw Omar's face hovering close, Lines of worry etched deep, tears still damp on his cheeks. He reached for my hand, his fingers trembling. In that moment, I carried the radiance of that realm in my gaze. I sensed the next chapter of my life unfolding, the first words I would speak, the first steps I would take. I whispered, voice raw but resolute, I have to tell them. He held my hand tighter, and in his eyes I saw both fear and unwavering love. I'll listen, he said. We'll do this together. And as the world of flesh and breath closed around me, I felt the truth settle in my soul. I was called not to change the world alone, but to become a vessel of the love that had transformed me. One heartbeat, one conversation, one life at a time. I awoke to a brightness that was neither harsh nor gentle, but striking in its ordinariness. The white ceiling of the hospital room, the pale green walls, the muted beep of machines. All of it felt strangely foreign after the boundless radiance I had just left behind. My chest tightened as I drew in a shallow breath, the sting of oxygen cold on my lips. Instinctively, my hand went to the bandage on my side and the thin plastic tube taped to my wrist. I was alive, undeniably, bafflingly alive. A soft murmur at my bedside drew my gaze. Omar leaned forward, his forehead creased with worry and wonder, his hand gripping mine like an anchor. Beside him, our daughter's wide eyes glistened with unspoken questions, and our son sat on a stool, hands folded in his lap as though in prayer. My sister Aisha hovered at the foot of the bed, clutching a tissue to her lips, her face pale but relieved. In that moment, the world of flesh and breath hammered against my consciousness with every sight and sound. "Welcome back," Omar whispered, his voice thick. "You gave us quite the scare." I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw, as though I had screamed silent words into the void. Instead, I managed a nod, my eyes filling with tears. My son scrambled off his stool, rushing to my side. "Mama, are you okay?" "For you all night." His small hand pressed against mine, and I felt the familiar warmth of his palm, an intimacy I had missed more than I realized. The door opened, and a team of doctors and nurses filed in, their expressions a blend of professional concern and quiet awe. They explained in clipped medical terms that I had suffered an obstruction in my airway, that my heart had stopped for several minutes, and that I had been resuscitated without neurological damage. A miracle, they said. I heard their words, but my mind drifted back to the stillness beyond death, to the light so alive it had spoken my name. In that realm, I had found peace and purpose. Here, I felt a tremor of dissonance. My body was intact, but my soul had been changed. After they left, Omar sank into the chair beside my bed and took my hand again. "They said you're lucky," he murmured. But I know it was more than that. I looked into his eyes, searching for skepticism or fear, but found only love. "It was more," I whispered, my voice small but steady. "I saw things, far beyond what any medical explanation can cover. I met him, Omar. I met Jesus." His grip tightened. "Jesus?" His brow furrowed, and I saw the internal struggle on his face, the rational doubt battling with the relief that I had come back. "How?" he began, but then closed his mouth as if realizing the question had no easy answer. I swallowed the swirl of emotion in my throat. "It wasn't a dream," I said, voice firm. "I was dead, and then I was in a place of light. I saw our family's life like a tapestry. I saw the world, its brokenness and its beauty. And then I saw him, standing in that light, telling me I was deeply loved and that I had to share that love with everyone." Omar exhaled slowly. "That's a lot." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I want to believe you. I really do, but I need to understand what happened." A gentle knock preceded the appearance of a nurse with updated vitals and a tray of water and crackers. While she checked my blood pressure, I focused on Omar's reaction. He didn't laugh, nor did he dismiss me. Instead, he listened with the patient attention I had always loved. That willingness to sit with mystery was itself a kind of faith. Later, once the nurse had left, my sister Aisha came forward, her eyes wrestling with emotion. "I heard everything," she said softly. "I know you've changed. Tell me more." My heart ached with gratitude. Aisha had always been the practical one, grounded, cautious, unwavering in her love for me. Yet now she leaned in expectantly, as though sensing that this moment was more significant than another family crisis. I took a sip of water, feeling the cool liquid anchor me back in my body, and began to speak again. I described the threshold of darkness, the gentle vibration that drew me toward light, the surge of freedom when every fear dissolved. I told them about the stillness that held me before the light appeared, and how in that place time had no meaning. I recounted, as best I could, the sensation of unconditional love that embraced me, the voice that spoke my name, and the figure of Jesus, radiant, tender, authoritative. I spoke of the vision of the world's fractures and the pockets of hope, and of the commission to share that love with every soul I encountered. My voice quivered as I spoke the final words. I came back so that I could live differently. I need to be the one who reaches out, who shows up, who listens, who loves without fear. Silence filled the room. My children looked at me with a blend of awe and confusion. My sister's eyes glistened with tears. Omar's gaze was unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded. "If that's what you experienced, then I believe you. And I'll help you, Sofia. We'll figure out how, together." Relief and resolve washed over me in equal measure. Sharing my story had been terrifying, but the act of speaking it aloud had anchored the reality of my mission in flesh and blood. I felt my body, though fragile, surging with purpose. In the days that followed, our hospital room became a sanctuary of quiet planning. While the children slept on fold-out chairs, Omar and I whispered about next steps. We agreed to start by simply living differently, by dedicating time each morning, before the sunrise call to prayer, to read the Gospel of John that I had acquired. Omar, ever the pragmatist, suggested we buy a second copy so he could read on his own. We talked about how to share with friends and neighbors, through small acts of kindness rather than grand declarations, through listening rather than preaching. I felt a newfound courage bloom within me. The fear of judgment, once a constant companion, had been replaced by the gentle conviction that love, kept hidden, withers, love, given freely, ripples outward in ways we cannot foresee. My physical recovery progressed swiftly. Each morning I edged closer to sitting up on my own, then to walking the corridor with a nurse. With every step I felt the echo of the realm of light in my bones. Even the simple act of feeling my feet on the ground held new wonder. Life had become sacramental. Every breath, every heartbeat, every conversation a potential gateway to grace. On the day of my discharge, a small crowd gathered in the hospital lounge. Omar, our children, Aisha, and a handful of close friends who had come to greet me. As I rose from the wheelchair and felt the tentative strength in my legs, I realized that this homecoming was more than a return. It was a launch. I stepped into Omar's arms, and the embrace bridged the gap between death and life, between the realm of light and the world of flesh. In that embrace, I heard again the echo of his voice, "Go and share my love with the world." And as we walked out of the hospital doors into the cool afternoon air, I carried within me a certainty greater than fear, a certainty that every step I took, in every ordinary moment of life, would be graced by the light I had once glimpsed, and that I would never walk alone. When we stepped through our front door that evening, the scent of home wrapped around me like a warm shawl. Familiar walls, the muted hum of the refrigerator, my daughter's stuffed rabbit perched on the sofa, yet everything felt different. The ordinary air of our living room shimmered with possibility. I realized that my near-death experience was no longer a private reverie, but the hinge on which our lives would turn. Omar closed the door behind us and gathered our children in a circle. He reached out to steady my hand, his eyes reflecting both pride and gentle awe. "Mama's home," he said simply. In that moment, home meant more than safety. It meant a place from which love would radiate outward. That night, as I lay in my own bed, sleep danced just beyond reach. Instead of fear or doubt, my heart thrummed with anticipation. I could almost hear the echo of Jesus' voice, "Go and share my love with the world." The commission that had felt so overwhelming in the hospital now settled in me as purpose, clear, steady, and sure. The next morning, long before dawn, I found myself in the quiet of our living room with a well-worn Bible open on my lap. The Gospel of John lay before me, its words more alive than ever. I read, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Light, life, love." I traced each phrase with my finger, feeling the gravity of those declarations in my bones. Omar joined me with 2 steaming mugs of tea. He offered me his copy of the Gospel, and for a moment I marveled at the intimacy of sharing God's Word together. We read the passages aloud, our voices weaving a tapestry of discovery. By the time the first prayer call echoed in the courtyard below, we had formed a silent pact. This journey would be a shared one. Over the following weeks, transformation touched every corner of our lives. At home, we replaced idly scrolling through news with family discussions about faith and hope. Our children, initially curious but cautious, listened as I recounted the vision of pockets of light amid the world's darkness. They asked questions, big, brave questions, and I answered as honestly as I could, acknowledging my own learning curve. In our neighborhood, small ripples began to spread. One afternoon, I baked too many date squares and found myself knocking on Mrs. Petrova's door, the elderly widow who lived alone 2 houses down. When she answered, surprised by the unexpected treat, her eyes filled with tears. "No one ever visits me," she whispered. We sat together on her porch, sharing tea and laughter. I didn't preach, I simply listened. By the time I left, Mrs. Petrova's shoulders were lighter, and I felt the tender echo of love passed from heart to heart. At work, Omar began to carry his own spark of change. He arranged a small break-room Bible study for colleagues who asked about our story. What started as a group of 3 blossomed into a steady circle of co-workers hungry for hope. Their questions ranged from skeptical to sincere, and Omar answered with gentle candor. "I don't have all the answers, but I found a new source of peace." For my part, I volunteered at the local women's shelter every Wednesday afternoon. I shared stories of grace with women who had known little but hardship, offering not just words but practical support, warm meals, listening ears, and the simple solidarity of presence. One woman, Fatima, who had fled an abusive marriage, gripped my hand and said, "Your faith gives me courage to believe I can rebuild my own life." Her words anchored me. This journey was more than theology. It was life made tangible. Not every response was gentle. Some old friends pulled back, wary of what they saw as a departure from tradition. A neighbor warned Omar that our children might be led astray. But even in those moments of tension, I felt the light I had known guiding me toward patience and compassion. I learned to pray for my critics, to seek common ground rather than division, and to let love be my most persuasive argument. One Sunday morning, we visited the small church I had first entered hesitantly after my recovery. The congregation welcomed us with open arms. I had never imagined I would find community within these walls, yet there I stood, hand in hand with Omar, our children dressed in their Sunday best, our hearts united in worship. When the pastor invited anyone who had experienced God's presence to share, I found my voice rising above the hymn. I spoke of light, of love, of a divine encounter that breathed life into every prayer I had ever uttered. Tears flowed freely as the congregation listened in rapt silence. Afterwards, many came forward to thank me for the courage to tell the truth and for the reminder that God's love transcends every boundary. That afternoon, we gathered with Aisha and her family in our backyard. The children played beneath the shade of our orange tree while we sat at a picnic table, sharing a simple meal. I looked around at the faces of those I loved, some newly intrigued, some thoughtfully reserved, all moved by the gentle power of shared stories and shared bread. In that moment, I realized the journey was not about converting others to a set of beliefs, but inviting them into a lived experience of love. As twilight fell, I stepped into the garden and watched fireflies flicker like distant stars. My heart swelled with gratitude for every step of the path, each breath of light in the darkness, each small act that brought healing to wounded hearts. I whispered a prayer. Thank you for calling me, for showing me that love is not a prize to earn but a gift to share. The world outside our walls remained the same, hurried, fractured, yearning, but within me burned a steady flame, a lighthouse beam cutting through the fog. I did not know what storms lay ahead or which bridges I would build. Yet I knew one unshakable truth. Every day of this new life was an invitation to embody the love I had received. And so, hand in hand with those I love and guided by the presence that never leaves us, I stepped forward into the dawn of this journey, ready to go and share that love with the world.